The most intimidating medical school interview question examples. Hey, BeMo Nation, welcome to another episode of our One Question podcast. My name is Ronza and I'm joined by my colleague Mang.
Hey, everyone.
Now, we have nothing to sell you, just pure strategies and tips, so everyone has equal access to education, of course. Now, in case you've never watched or listened to one of these before, they are completely unscripted. There's no fancy music, audio, visual effects of that nature. It's honestly just pure content. Now, we have 10 minutes to tackle a new topic each week, and this week's topic is the most intimidating medical school interview question examples. All right, let me set the timer. Perfect. Now, before we dive into this, Mang, I think it's very important to mention that the medical school interview could be a very overwhelming and daunting experience for those that have gone through it and not done well, for those that are hoping to go through it, or that have absolutely no idea what it is about. Now, the interview itself can vary from program to program. There's different structures. It can be open in the sense that, whoever's interviewing you, whether it's a panel or an individual, they have access to your application and they can kind of nitpick some of the experiences that you've discussed. It can be closed. They have absolutely no idea about these experiences. They don't see it in front of them. I don't think that really alters things drastically. Whether they pinpoint an experience and you have to be quick to respond, or whether they just vaguely ask you and you have to really recap the experience, you might freeze. I think there's pros and cons to both, is what I'm saying. It doesn't really matter. I think what you do need to pay attention to is the strategy of how to approach it. Now, having done a lot of these with students, Mang, you can attest to this. There are questions where you often hear a student say, I'm really worried about this one. I'm really scared. Do you think they'll ask this? How do I approach this? And between Mang and I think we could really identify maybe three that we feel students tend to be very intimidated by it. The first being, tell me about yourself. Now, this is one that we could say likely anticipate this because, admissions will want to get to know you and really actually get to know you from you. How do you speak about yourself? And actually, before getting into the other few, let's just tackle this one, Mang. What is the best strategy for this? This is intimidating because it seems easy, but there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, for sure. When I ask this question in a mock interview with students, you can kind of see behind their controlled faces, like the look of fear in their eyes, because like you said, it seems quite easy before you start thinking about it. And then you realize that it's so open as a question. There's so much you could talk about, but obviously you don't want to rant about yourself, right? So how do you answer this question in a way that covers all the right materials, that is thorough, but also doesn't take you the whole 10 minutes to respond and put the interviewer to sleep, right? So how do you balance all of that? The first thing you need to recognize is that this is a personal question. Now, this might seem obvious, but I'm saying that because we recommend a specific structure for any question that could be identified as a personal question. These types of questions are ones that are designed for the interviewer to get to know about you. So for a very open question like this, I like to encourage students to do a little bit of brainstorming outside the interview first, to prepare for it, to reflect, and to identify maximum 3 things that they would want the interviewer to know about them, right? If you had only 3 minutes with someone, and that's all the time you had with them, what would you want them to know about you that would help them to make a decision about whether or not you're a good candidate for their program? So hopefully by thinking about it that way, you can already start to narrow down the content that you might want to include in your answer to this question. And when you've decided on what those 3 ideas might be, what those 3 traits or experiences might be, then you can go ahead and follow a very simple structure to go through each of those. And that is to describe an experience, probably one that was very significant to you, and to focus for that experience on what you learn, right? What that experience says about who you are. This is the kind of the main component of that, that part of your answer. And then to talk about hopefully how it applies to who you will be as a student in their program and as a professional in their field. So it's really those three components that need to be present in your answer for each of the ideas that you decide to include. And that's basically it.
Amazing, Mang. So there you have it. You just need guided strategies. You do not need to rehearse your answer. You do need to reflect, of course, as Meg mentioned, and really, of course, put this to practice, but not in a way where you over rehearse and sound robotic, because it needs to be sincere. Amazing, Meg. Now, the next one I can think of would probably have to be, students asking us, I'm really afraid to talk about any weaknesses or challenges that I have. So the next example is, tell us about a challenge or a weakness that you have. I can understand and empathize with students as to why in itself this is challenging, because they need to be strategic. So what would you say the best approach is to this?
Well, again, we have to recognize what question type this is. And again, this is a question that is personal, right? The idea is to get to know you. And like you said, this is an intimidating question because maybe you're afraid to share about your true weakness because you're afraid that it might impact the interviewer's decision in a negative way. And that's actually something that you'll want to get over mentally in order to do well answering this question. The biggest error I see students make on this kind of question, which I guess we can categorize as a negatively charged personal question, is that they skirt around the question. They don't actually answer the question, or they talk about a weakness that could be turned into a strength. And your answer, if you do that, comes off very, very disingenuous, right? And the interviewer is not interested in that kind of information. So what we would recommend is it's the same structure. Talk about your weakness or experience, right? And do so in a candid way. Don't try to dart around it. Just be direct, just be candid about it. But then the focus of your answer should be on how you overcame that, how you're working on your weakness, if that's what you're talking about, what you're doing about it to change, grow, improve, right? So that you're demonstrating that you can recognize your own weaknesses and you can do something about it. And that's really the true trait that they're after, is someone who understands and can kind of confess their mistakes, but also grow from it in a way that in the future could benefit other people, in a way that showcases that you're not just a stagnant individual in your life, that you're constantly working on self-improvement and professional development. So that's what they're really looking for. And then the last piece, of course, as I had mentioned before, to any personal question is the application piece, right? How does that apply to how you're going to conduct yourself as a future student, as a future professional, when similar challenges or even bigger challenges arise?
I cannot agree anymore. Transparency and accountability, you guys.
Exactly.
Do not want to tiptoe around this. Just be concise and brief, direct, but focus more on the latter. A lot of the things that Meng talked about is how you're growing, what you've learned, how you could apply. I think that's the biggest piece that students tend to neglect, because they're just so worried about, well, how do I even say it? That part is not even the most important part, is really the takeaways and how you've grown from it. Amazing. Okay, now the last one, and it's one that we've seen a lot of, is the intimidation to about any sort of application discrepancy. So when they say anything regards to, tell us about an area of your application that you'd like to improve, or tell us about an area of discrepancy within your application. How do you approach this? Whether you have something to say or not to say, I think it's very important to make note of this, because it could overlap to a lot of different areas and different questions that you might be asked.
This is a very common question, whether it's in the even in the written application. So you maybe have already thought about this, but they could definitely ask again during the interview, if especially if it's an open file kind of interview where they are looking at your record and your application. And this is a very similar type of question to the one we just talked about, right? It again is about a weakness of yours or something that's happened that you feel that is unfavorable to your application.
So, Meg, we only have like 15 seconds. Let's just give them the meat.
It's basically the same thing. You want to, again, be transparent about it. Don't try to dart around it. Highlight what you learned from the experience, how you'll improve, and whatever the application is going to be in your future
And
application.
that's time. Thank you so much, you guys. We have to stay true to our 10 minutes. There you have it. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you like this as much as we enjoyed making it for you, go ahead and share it with a friend. Subscribe so you don't miss a future episode, of course. And do ask any questions you have in the comments section. Thank you so much. Until next time, see you.